Which team are you on? You on
Um,
Axis, it looks like.
no, that's not me. That's the bot with my name.
Oh, okay. There's two of them.
Yeah. So I'll actually have a one on my name, but I don't care which team we do.
All right. Well, I did a bunch of different things. We can do Axis save 16 right now. And I am easy.
Damn, this admin message shit, real annoying.
Yeah, I found if you just hit, or at least set the mats up, you can click it at least whenever you're in
Oh
game.
yeah. That works.
I'm gonna turn down command chat and everything real quick. All right, which loadout you want me playing on SL?
Car 98, baby.
Nice. You're also talking double too, by the way.
Ooh, my.
All right, so I guess to kind of kick it off, what were you doing before you came to HLL? Like, what games were you playing and stuff?
So I played. Oh, am I still hot micing? Sorry.
Yeah, and game chat there.
Okay. Fuck, I'm sorry. I'll just change my Discord. I don't know why. It's because I use a mouse button. Okay. Alright, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, dope. Um, yeah, could you just rephrase the question real quick?
So, what were you playing before you came to Hell Loose? Like the games that you kind of came from, and were they competitive in nature?
Yeah, so I guess the first competitive game I played was Counter-Strike. I played CSGO for a few years. Like this was maybe, I don't know, 7 years ago now. And then after that, I played. So I played there. I was like, I got up to LMG or whatever in the early days, and got disillusioned with the grinding, quit. Then I got on Overwatch. I played Overwatch as a Grandmaster Ana main for like 3 seasons, and then I quit that, and eventually I came to Loose.
How did you find the game? Was it through like a friend, or was there like an ad or something?
No, I found it on Steam, but I was looking for a very specific type of game. I was looking to RP. I'm like one of these seventh cav, you know, 10th mountain type of RPers. And I wanted just like a Held Loose, compared to Postscriptum or whatever, some of the other titles had like uh, good interiors and good graphics, and it just looked like a good experience all around for sort of prone crawling and RPing and all this. So that's how I started playing HLL, and it was a lot of fun for that. And then eventually I realized like I could join a community, and there's a comp scene and all this.
What was the first community that you were?
The first community I ever joined was Easy Company, which is still around today, I believe, but I don't think they're competitive.
Yeah, I think they're starting a rebuilding process.
They've been rebuilding for years, but yeah, basically, I started joining Easy because um, the idea was like they're an RP clan, and I wanted to do some sort of like RP events, and eventually, um, this was back in update 6 of the game, so late 2018, early 2019. Um, and I just realized like, wait, maybe there might actually be like a more competitive scene where like, you don't have to wrangle your fellow teammates in a pub. Like people are actually trying to win and all this.
Right.
Um, so I helped create Easy's first comp team. Um, and back then there was a lot of like back then the seasonal didn't exist. This was like before seasonal, and basically the only thing that really existed was like this 18 verse 18 format that ESPT's predecessor HLTC had come up with. Um, and they had this big like I'd say the first HLL tournament ever was that 18v18 international, as far as I know anyway, because people like clans still couldn't field 50-player teams. Like clans were still pretty small back then, and people were still figuring it out, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so you know, but lots of clans could field like a full 3 squads of 18 or whatever. So yeah, so that's the first tournament I played in as infantry with Easy. Oh, there's a guy up here at the trench. Um, yeah, and the idea was basically like I was an SL and we played. There's a bunch of teams, double elimination, I think it was, and eventually we got to the finals with HLTC, and we won as Easy. So I won my
Nice.
first tournament back then.
And you said this was like late 2018, early 2019, around
Well,
there.
no, I started playing in late 2018, early 2019, but I didn't join Easy until like late 2019, early 2020. I think it was late 2019 when we first started playing. And then the tournament must have been early 2020.
Right.
Uh, and then after that, I we had some disagreements with Easy because like the comp team I should say had a bunch of disagreements with Easy because Easy is kind of an RP clan. They care about, you know, chain of command and all this. Like everyone's like a lieutenant and all this over there.
Yeah.
So which is whatever if you're trying to RP, but if you're trying to be competitive, like you want more of a fluid group structure, like community structure, so that you don't have to like. It's not like a monarchy, basically. You want a more democratic structure, so we decided that we're gonna split off. Like the comp team's gonna split off. We're gonna make our own team. Um, and so we split off and made TL, and I'm one of TL's founders.
Who were some of the other founders that split off with you?
Um, Mage, who you'll know these days is the guy who RDs for TL.
Mm-hmm.
And Tacotastic, Misfire, who's not around anymore. Um, and there's only a couple others that are left from those days. Most people have sort of backed off. Um, but yeah, so like back in but before we became TL, like we eventually gained enough steam off of the like HLTC 18v18 Cup that we could actually field a 50-player team, and that was the first days of the seasonal. So the seasonals, the first two seasonals were kind of the sort of early stages before core, before the sort of zeitgeist of competitive teams. So we were playing as easy back then, and we weren't great, but it was just the fact that people were actually fielding 50-player teams was like crazy, at the time.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so eventually, we left, we started TL, um, and actually, yeah. So there's one thing I wanted to mention real quick, which was the Tank Bible, that whole era. Before, like when I joined Easy, I'm a, I started tanking, you know,
Yeah.
and because to me tanking is very like it's more interesting than infantry because you have to work really closely with two or three, or sorry, two other players, and the problem is that you know like with inf you can sort of redeploy to a certain location after you die or swap spawns or whatever. But in a tank, like you have to drive over there. So that sort of positioning became really like a mind itch for me,
Yeah.
uh, scratching my sort of competitive side. But because I was tanking and I realized that there's no resources out there for what I want. Um, like how many hits does it take to kill this tank with the other tank? How many AT hits? All this, like people were, you could go on a YouTube video and you could see like, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. So I was like, I'm gonna make a resource that everybody can use to be like the definitive resource, and that became the Tank Bible.
And you said that was before
That was an
TL.
easy, yeah.
Okay.
But I've been updating it since then, with the updates.
Right. So it's kind of been a living document.
Yeah, yeah, and it's grown over the years. It's not just AT and tanks. It's arty bombing runs, satchels, how to kite, how to drive, stuff like that. Like all the mechanics you could possibly want to know about tanking. And so yeah, so I feel like especially in the early days, like the basics were really important, and I think a lot of tankers learned a lot from having that resource available.
Right. So your tank crew in Easy, is that still the same tank crew you play with today, or had players moved
Oh
on? Or
no, Christ no. Um, Back in the easy days, you could reliably duo. The meta was so different. Um, like back in update 7, like update 6, update 7, which you ask any veteran, they'll tell you that's the best update.
yeah.
Um, for me, the reason that was the best update was because you could um like there were some bugs in the game. I don't know if they were bugs or features, but there were some bugs in the game that allowed you to um like one shot heavies with mediums if you shot like a very specific part of the plate, or the turret, and that allowed for like skilled players to really sort of mop the floor even with heavies and like cheap tanks. Um, so back then, like that was, nowadays it's super, you need a heavy to kill a heavy and all this, and it's super streamlined. But back then there was like skill shots to it, and it was more so. And you could duo because the switched timer of the tanks was not so long. Like it was only like, I don't know, a second to switch from seat to seat. So, you drive and you have a gunner, and then you stop, go to spotter, find the tank, engage it, or move on. Um, but yeah, so back then I was duoing with Tacotastic 13, as he's known. And these days, like during the peak core days when TL was at its best, I was tanking with Grecker and a guy named Unique. And these days I'm tanking with Grecker and Jack.
Right. Yeah, I remember, or I've talked to Nos quite a bit, and he showed me videos of the 2-man tank meta because that was before my time, and it looked a lot more, I guess, interesting. Because right now, like from an outside perspective, because I don't really tank that much, looking at it, kind of seeing how the armor behaves and stuff, and I started whenever, or even before, the medium used to be able to pin that panther on the turret. Like I remember that, but I
Yeah.
don't think that's even possible anymore. So I guess that's kind of interesting to me that they had changed that. Do you think it was for the better for the game that they did that? Kind of taking away the skill shots, or do you think it was worse for the game overall?
No, I think it was. I mean, I think it was worse. I think there needs to be some sort of asymmetrical, like asymmetrical balance is not necessarily a bad thing. Like heavies should be able to kill a medium in one shot. But like the medium should have some way if they're good. Like it should be some kind of threat. Right now, it's not. Right now, if you're playing a medium, like unless you get some sort of like wacky, um, gold dragon type of flank, in a normal comp match against a good team, you're just not going to be able to pull that off reliably. So the
Right.
medium is basically useless, following the opener. Unless you're playing, like it's not useless, like you can play it, but you have to hide from tanks. You have to
Yeah.
find an angle that can only see infantry and just shell infantry, lock down the
Yeah.
zone.
It just becomes kind of like a area denial kind of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, it is what it is. Like, in terms of the duo meta, I think a lot of players like the duo meta, but I find that forcing trios is actually better for the game because there's like trios is how tanks are meant to be played, and having that communication to be able to work effectively as three dudes in a tank is what sets like the best tankers apart from your average tankers.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I see tanking as like a almost like more of a strategy game than an FPS. Like I play a lot of games like Hoi 4 and Stellaris and these strategy games, and it's more about where you position on the map and like how you engage with enemy tanks and infantry on a macro level, um, in a comp match at least, than it is about like your raw skill as a tanker. Like at the end of the day, like shooting as an infantry player is harder than being a tank gunner. It's harder than like skill wise, like macro skill wise. It's harder than driving. It requires like years to teach that as a skill. But like the positioning of a tank and sort of where to play to you have to always be in a position where like you're doing the maximum for your team, and yeah, that all takes years to master.
Yeah. So I know that TL had become a seasonal finalist team. Like, how fast did it take TL to get to a seasonal final, or at least be at
Well,
that level?
TL was like TL's first seasonal was the third ever seasonal, so if I remember correctly, it took 2 or 3 seasonals to get to that point. Um, Basically, like TL's been through a bunch of different, um, not to say iterations, but we've rebuilt the team many times, and I've been a part of all of those rebuilds. And basically, um, like as soon as we branched off from easy, which was the second seasonal, for the third seasonal, we played easy in the group stage, and we just rolled we rolled the team, and it was pretty cathartic back then. But like easy had managed to get some people who were interested in making rebuilding their comp team after we had left from easy, and easy's comp team, they weren't bad, but we rolled them, and they eventually realized they came to the same conclusion we did, which is like easy's leadership doesn't work for comp. And so they left and created their own community called BR1, and this was an NA community back in the days of, the third, fourth seasonal. And eventually, we teamed up, but we decided like, hey, we're gonna be better if we could actually have a good NA team if we team up. So we put our best players into the roster, and we played some seasonals together, some HPLs, which was the other tournament back then. And eventually we realized, like the BR1 side of things realized that, the BR1 leadership is kind of sucks too. So basically the entirety of the BR1 comp team just up and left and joined TL. So at that point, like that was an example. The BR1 TL combo, it, um, is an example of a joint team that actually sort of managed to work out, and that's where a lot of your players, like even your best veterans today, come from BR1. Like Mr. Do, his entire tank, who plays for XD now, who used to be in TL, he came from BR1. Our current commander, Jay Bork, came from BR1. So yeah, and then after that, after that build up, the team started gaining steam for the seasonal, and that whole story is kind of long. I don't know if you want to get into it, but
Yeah, go ahead. I'd like to hear it all.
yeah. So like from the start, oh shit,
I'm in
I
George, by the way.
yeah I accidentally made a tank squad because I'm so used to doing that on Flip.
What role you want me playing, by the way?
um, SL if you can.
Oh, I meant like Thompson, Carbine, Grand.
Um, Carbine.
Ooh, okay.
I'll wait for a spot. Yeah. So to start, like ever since TL was created, and even before then, like during the easy days, there's always been kind of like a NA-EU rivalry, as I'm sure you
Yo, that guy's
realize
high as
now.
hell.
Oh yeah.
And there's an NA-EU rivalry in every game, But
Do you need
EU
supplies?
famously, creators of the
Yes.
seasonal, the best teams at the start of the seasonal were European, WTH, and when Core was created, that was like, Core
You would have thought
Core's
they would have brought
was
more than
and
just
arguably
one
still
transport
is the
truck to the
best
center
team to
location.
have ever graced the scene.
Nah, man.
Um,
What are you talking about?
and so there's this idea of like,
Makes
and
too much
in my
sense.
opinion, I'm not here to toss a bunch of tea, but my opinion, EU teams have always sort of looked down on NA teams,
This is new
because
gen
NA teams
technology
have
or
not been
something.
able
What
to
is this shit?
historically have not been able to
I
organize
believe
the
they call
same
it the
way.
hyphen Tyson.
Even though like, we have talent, we have,
It means big fucking
um,
carrier.
it's not like we don't have shooters, but it's just people are in these disparate clans, and there's no sort of there was never a big sort of core like amalgamation of a bunch of different teams and skill. And I think I don't know. I think I like to think that TL during its height was the closest thing we ever got to that, but um, yeah. So you know, there's this NAE rivalry is building up, and we never really had the better like map knowledge or game sense, even during the height of TL's career. But we had some really dedicated veterans who spent a lot of time like prepping their asses off. You hear memes about if you talk to like B9, you hear memes about Inferno debriefing for 18 hours straight, and the arty snipe. Uh, like Core invented the arty snipe famously in the seasonal,
Hmm.
but I think it's NA that actually like took it to the next level and you know made teams realize that you can actually snipe from like all over the map, in lots of different ways, like on Hurricane even, and on um, and all these things. So and truck snipes and tank snipes back in the day, those were the meta. If you could get a truck off the opener, you basically secure the opener.
Yeah.
Rocket snipes, you know. These days, these are just like common things that everybody uses. But these were all like brainchilds of a lot of prep that a bunch of different you know teams have been doing. And so essentially, um, to set the stage, Core was the best team at the time. As soon as they got created, they had basically 5-0'd every single um, team that they had ever played, and they were undefeated basically, except for like honestly, to this day, I only know, and maybe Havald, you had an interview with Havald, but maybe he could tell you more, but I'm pretty sure they were only defeated by um, Trigger on Stalingrad one time, which was, that was like, it's a kind of a weird map, and Trigger was this huge Chinese team, like the best Chinese team, even to this day, honestly, because Trigger is another one of those examples where like Trigger was a team that was, a million Chinese teams rolled into one, and they all agreed, hey, we're gonna play we're gonna play together. It's kind of like Core. Um, so anyways, Core is 5-0ing every team, and it's pretty obvious that they're gonna win the whole thing. But we're kind of picking up steam over the course of that seasonal, and I don't remember which exact seasonal. I think it was the 5th or 6th seasonal. Um, and the closer we get to the finals, like a lot of NA players from different clans and or who have been in retirement, kind of get this idea that they maybe TL is like NA's chance to finally stick it to the Euros, so to speak,
Right.
because like everyone like a lot of NA people think that the WTH people who shit talk in seasonal chat and the core, especially the core people who um I respect core massive, or core doesn't exist anymore, but I respect the core players a lot, and I'm buddies with Havald. But a lot of the NA players saw them as like toxic. They would come on here and they would say we're the best team, everybody else sucks, and it was kind of true. But you want to stick it to those guys who are so self-centered. Um, so people start joining TL because they think that this is our chance to finally stick it to we're making it to the playoffs and stuff like that. And um, I think it's kind of like an underdog story because we were really a no-name team at the time. At the start of the seasonal, like nobody expected us to honestly even get to the playoffs. Um,
Right.
I just got strafed. Yeah, so, you know, eventually we get to the semifinals, and we're playing ESPT on Hurricane Axis, and Core decides that they're gonna, they decide, you know, out of charity, I think, partially, but they also respected us as a team. They decided to give us a scrim on the same map inside right before the match, and we had been prepping our asses off for the ESPT match because ESPT was a really strong team too. And you know, NA was like back then. NA was I think stronger than it is now because you had these two teams in the top 5, ESPT and TL, and they were just chock full of amazing talent. These days ESPT is still good, but you know, TL's fallen off. But anyways, so we end up winning that game against Core, that scrim right before the semifinals against Core, and it was the first time that Core had been defeated, really. I mean, that people knew of, and everyone was like super hyped, and then, you know, like as soon as we won that match, like people were coming out of retirement. People were wondering like what the fuck is going on. Um, we actually have a chance to like win the whole thing, and everyone was super excited. And like it turned out that, you know, even players who like I hadn't seen since like good players I hadn't seen since the easy days, were like, this is it. This is our one chance to finally do it. And it was a really close game, both in that scrim and in the ESPT like semifinals match. But we managed to win both those games, and we were headed off to the finals. And basically, you know, but by the time of the finals, like we had, you know, 200, like no fewer than 200 players signed up to show the match. I mean,
Right.
you probably know, like, you know, when you guys were in the finals, I'm sure you guys had like everybody's lining up to play the finals, you know, because the finals of the seasonal is like a big deal. All these Euro teams, you know, they win like 10 seasonals and they're like, whatever, who cares? But you know, for us lowly NA, we gotta take what we can get.
Yeah,
Um,
I think we were around like maybe 80 or so signups, maybe 90, which usually it floats at around the 60
ye-
mark. So
yeah, exactly. Like, but yeah, I mean, I have all to tell you, like that finals match was the sweatiest match ever because I think a lot of the reason is because the stakes seemed really high because for Core, like, you know, they had been pretty much undefeated and whatever, some scrim they lost to TL, like who cares? But they knew that they actually had a chance of losing, and up until then, you know, like some of the good EU teams like WTH or whatever, they um you know, they gave Core a run for their money, but you know, it's not like WTH had been like didn't make the semis in that seasonal. So to them it was like the only, like the team that actually could stand a chance of beating them, because we did beat them, was in the finals. And you know, it's one thing to lose to some Euro team that, you know, you might win or lose against at any given seasonal, but especially for a team like Core, which, you know, German speaking, and they don't, like, they're very proud of where they are. They don't want to lose to some dog shit underdog NA team, you know.
yeah,
So, and for us, of course, you know, the stakes are really high because this is our only chance. If we lose the seasonal, you know, probably people are gonna retire, like, because of the amount of sheer prep that was going into this. Like, we were burning really bright, but people were gonna burn out. Like you could tell during the finals, like as soon as this is over, people are gonna spread to the 4 wins. It's never gonna be the same. So we had to. It was our one chance to actually get it. So yeah, it was a really sweaty match, really close match. There's a lot of memes about me making like a blunder in my tank, making a blunder, going to cattle sheds, in the last 20 minutes of the game, which I'll never live down. And then, yeah, so core won, and then after the seasonal, some players quit, some players moved on to different teams, and some people burned out, and TL, was on the underside of the swing.
After that seasonal, did you participate for any other team, or did TL keep going and participating in seasonals? Like, what was kind of, I guess, the fallout like after that match?
Yeah, so a bunch of people like retired. Some players like Bloody Nine, Chicken, they went on to play for WTH. And I think like I understand a lot of the moves. I've always been TL, I'm a founder of TL. I will stick with TL no matter what. TL is like the team that I want to play for. But I understand people wanting to move to other teams when you've just been at this really high level of play and you know that because of retirings and burning outs and all this and people leaving that, if you stick with TL, you're going to have to actually rebuild the team. It's not going to be like WTH level again for the next seasonal. You're going to spend a seasonal having to rebuild the team. And I've spent many TL swings up and down, There's been lots of times, even from the easy days, where I've had to, like me along with the other TL veterans, have had to rebuild the team, just go back to the pubs, recruiting people, getting new tankers, getting like vacuuming up little NA clans to try to get something to work. And that's the really hard work behind like getting to the seasonal finals. And some people just don't want to do that. And so, but like that's what I live for. Like I want to win the seasonal. I want to be sort of the dream child of NA again, and I want it to be as TL. I don't want to do it. I don't want to just join XD and win the seasonal. But yeah. So like a lot of we spent a lot of time rebuilding, and eventually we passed the next seasonal without anything, and then core broke apart. I think after that, the seasonal after the one we were in the finals, and there's a bit of a vacuum there, because WTH became the best team, and Greyhounds were good, but like a lot of the like there wasn't like a big giant to go after. I mean WTH was still really good, but like it wasn't on the same level as core. You could still beat WTH like with a similar team. But eventually we started gaining steam, and like for the next seasonal after that, we got together with a NA team called Helios, which they still exist today.
Yeah.
But back then they were small. They were kind of like us in the sense that we were kind of on a downswing and they were just coming up. So we both had some good vets, but about half our roster were just like new blueberries who, they got to figure out which way to hold the gun, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So we played each other for a bunch of matches. We were friendly, and eventually we realized like, why don't we just get together and we can take another stab at the seasonal pie with the Dream NA team. So a bunch of the Helios people came over, and they were not like the Helios people were not happy with their leadership in Helios and the way it was running, so they decided to come over. We basically gave them a lot of space, and then we started gaining some steam now that we had these veterans who from both teams, and we finally we started getting some wins under our belt, and then you know, some of these like old veterans that had left TL after that seasonal loss to Core started realizing, hey, wait, there might be a second chance to play with the team that I love and that I have a bunch of friends in, and like at a high level. You know, why play for WTH when you could play this at the same level for TL? And again, that like EU and a rivalry comes up. So you know, like people like B9, people like Inferno, you know, coming out of retirement just to get another stab at the pie, and um, you know, like Dabs, Gorilla, who used to play for DC, Streets, who used to play for DC. All those players came back as we started gaining steam, getting to the playoffs and all this. And then, yeah, so we didn't make it to the finals. I think we made it. Did
Quarter.
we play ESPT in the
Yeah, the SME game.
semis? Is that the
Yeah, it might have
semis or
been.
the?
I don't remember. I know there was a Greyhounds Omaha game, and then there was a TL SME game. And that
Yeah.
might have been after, so it probably was the semis.
Yeah. So I think it was the semis, and it's just like you know, we had some people missing from that game. Like I couldn't make that game, and ESPT had a really good showing on a good map that you know they know really well. So um, we lost there, and then after that, you know, people. It was the same sort of story as the first time we lost to Core. Like people started realizing, like smelling blood in the water, and being like, okay, well, TL's gonna. All those people who came out of retirement are gonna go back to retirement, and then everybody who used to be on WTH and all this are gonna move to a new team. And then Havald and friends formed XD, and a bunch of like, you know, basically all of TL's tank core except for my tank joined XD, and of course players like Bloody Nine, you know, TL vets who make up a good portion of XD's player base now, RTL, and I think that's the big difference. Like XD is the spiritual successor to Core, in a lot of ways, but I think the difference is that there's a lot more NA players in XD now,
Yeah.
and I think that makes it hard for NA teams to, you know, when the NA players are playing for the top dog EU team, you know, it's hard to rebuild. You're wrangling cats on the, but yeah, TL has its upswings and downswings. Like 3 or 4 times now, we've had to rebuild the team, and right now we're on that downswing. But you know, I live in a, I eat in a, I shit in a, I breathe in a. So I'm not gonna go to EU team. As much as I have respect for Havald and the old core guys and some of the WTH guys, I don't like. I want NA to stick it to the Euros. That's what I want. And um, I don't personally like. I've had some disagreements with ESPT people in the past, which is why I won't join ESPT. So for me, like the only team that's viable is TL, especially given the amount of time that I've spent in it and the amount of time that I've like already spent growing and regrowing the team and all this. Like I'm not gonna give up on it now, and I think that it has a chance of coming back. To be another season. And mark my words, when that happens, all these people are gonna come back to realize that NA dream, like they have several times already.
Yeah, I'm kind of forecasting after this seasonal there probably will be some NA players coming back from EU teams, or at least I hope there will, because it's nice to kind of shake up the scene a little bit.
Yeah.
Because right now the player aggregation is pretty rough in the top four. There's like a very big gap between like the top four and everybody else, which is, to me, it's a little unhealthy. But yeah, hopefully that'll change after this seasonal.
Yeah.
What is the rebuilding looking like right now in TL? How has it been kind of going?
Well, I'm a tanker. I do my best to rebuild the tank core after Mr. Do's tank and Dabs and Gorilla's tank left. And they're of course the like the best tanks on XD right now. But you know, I basically have to build it from the ground up, but we have some really promising tankers coming up. And really like I think if we were to gobble up some sort of small up and coming NA team, we could probably be like competitive in a seasonal. But it's kind of just like luck of the draw for when that happens, you know.
Yeah,
But in terms of like until then, we're sort of like we have good tanks. We've always historically had good tanks because we have the veterans when we have a lot of prep, but we still have good tanks. We just lack the infantry front line to hold against better teams. But
right.
yeah, the build is, you know, it's going okay, I think. But if we don't gobble any teams by next seasonal, we should be able to get like we should be able to get back to like a mid-tier team. Right now we're like a Z tier team. Um, I want to get to the point by next seasonal that we're dealing with, like, we're able to go toe to toe with sort of other teams that have always been like low key good, but not like haven't made it super far into the seasonal. It seems like 82 AD, old old 32, like Chimera, um, and stuff like that. So. Yeah, it's slow, but and then sometimes it sucks, you know, like you lose a bunch of matches in a row and then your blueberries wondered why they joined this team and not some other team. But you know, you try it and do your best.
Right. Has there been anybody in the community that you would, I don't know. So I know that you're talked about as like a really very strong tanker.
Yeah.
Series.
Um yeah, well, I mean, I famously think every other tanker is bad, but no, I will give a good answer to this because there are some tankers that I think deserve mention. Right now, if you don't count my squad, the best tank in the game is Gold Dragon's WTH tank, which is Gold Dragon with Rising Valhalla as a gunner. I've watched a lot of his VODs. He's got a really good understanding of um, like where he needs to be on the map, game sense, like how he can contribute to capping a point. And um, after that, I'd say um, the X the XTL tankers who now play for XD. So Mr. Do's tank, Mr. Do especially, has a lot of he's got a ton of really high level comp experience, and he has like he's got a good head on his shoulders, obviously. And then Dabs and Grilla, who also play for XD now. And then after that, the other WTH tank that I think is good is Honey Badger's tank. Honey Badger, I don't remember who his gunner is, but and then Wix on Helios. And then Wix plays with a tank on Helios, and then after that it's probably Feet Tony from Greyhounds. Yeah, those are the top right now, in my opinion. A lot of those are NA, you'll notice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just because like the veteran, like every team has a group of veterans that like spend all the prep to do the match, and on NA that happens to be the tankers. So the best players are the tankers, and on EU the most veteran best players are the infantry.
Right.
Maybe that's why they keep winning. But hey, what are you supposed to do?
We got like 2 tanks out here just camping our OP. Not really camping it, but just sitting outside. There's like a kill
Trying
box.
to satchel them, yeah, but yeah, it's tough to say with the tankers because like a lot of tanking, people don't understand that so much of tanking depends on how your infantry is moving the front line.
Right.
You could be the best tanker ever, and we struggle with this problem many times because like you could be the best tanker ever, you could have the best position ever, you could kill every enemy tank, but if your front line gets pushed, and the enemy tanks can leverage infantry to flush you out of your position or to satchel you or whatever, or just to annoy you, make you move, then you're not going to be able to play optimally, part of the reason why like Gold Dragon and the WTH tanks are good is because they are allowed, like their infantry gives them the space they need to like basically do whatever they want and operate however they want. And Core famously had this like in large quantity, right? Because Core's Inf, like you hear stories about Core's Inf, and it wasn't strictly true, but you would just hear these stories of like all they do is hold W, like they don't care. Offense is the best defense. They'll just like it doesn't matter wherever you leave a space, that's where they'll be filling in like a matter of seconds,
Yeah.
And so when you have a team like that, it's super easy to hold on, I'm satcheling the tank.
You've betrayed your own kind.
Yeah.
No.
Well, yeah, so it's a lot easier for those teams to do good tanking, but I think I've watched enough VODs to assess raw skill, and the WTH tankers do have, and the XD tankers now do have very good raw skill. That's why they're on that team.
Yeah. That's one thing I've come to kind of learn playing against EU teams in my time in Esprit is I feel like the cohesion is very strong in a lot of those bigger EU teams. Just like how they move as kind of one, which is essentially I guess the idea behind the whole scene of comp, right, is you don't want people pulling in different directions. Like if everyone's on the same page, then you're just going to be successful. If you take out, just raw skill from the equation, but kind of just seeing the mid-game decision making and how well the team responds. Because core was before my time, right? So, but kind of seeing now. I see what you're saying, and I totally agree with.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm at the end of the day, like, I'm proud of what TL has already done, and if TL breaks apart, I'll be sad, but I will also, it'll be like bittersweet, you know, like I think it was a lot of fun to sort of live in the fantasy land of like work so hard to build up the team several times and then like have that reward and catharsis um, for doing that. And I'm proud of HCA. Little known fact that TL basically founded the HCA.
Right.
And the idea was that we, like, it was that we were unhappy with some of the rules and rulings of the seasonal, and we wanted a more democratic system, and get more teams in there. Basically, we created our own tournament because like we wanted a rival tournament, and HCA became you know, I don't like it's. I think it pushed the seasonal to be more democratic in a lot of ways. Like, but teams vote now for what they want to happen, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, it's stuff like that that. Oh, I'm gonna satch another tank. It's things. It's things like that in the comp community that it's that growth and sort of um, pushing people to be more democratic with their but both their community structure, like leadership structure, and also the tournaments is something that TL has always been doing.
Right. What would you say? So I'm guessing your favorite time in the game would definitely core. Would that be your
Yeah,
top time during the game?
yeah, that was, you know, the time where we were the most energized, the most talked about. Um, but also like even if we weren't the top team back then, like there was just core was this like monster that everybody could everybody in NA could sort of rally against. And after we started playing them, and I realized that, like, you know, obviously there's the EU NA rivalry, but like they, you know, they're good players. People like Havald are uh, respectable people who are just trying to have a good game and all this, you know. So, um, like Core is one of those teams I respect, and I feel like um, a DC, for example, was never like that for me. I feel like DC was chock full of dudes who were kind of just like, I don't know. They obviously they're known for being toxic, and you know that those rumors are not without their grains of truth, you know. Um, and I think a lot of those DC people survive in XD to this day. Um, but yeah. I'd say that was my favorite time, but in terms of the meta, um, I'd say honestly, there's probably no better time than right now. I know that seems weird. I feel like veterans wouldn't say that, but the fact is that like people like metas change over time, even if the game doesn't change. But the game obviously has been changing. But like the point I'm trying to make is people learn how to play the game. You know, like back in the day, um, people were learning the basics, how to get map control, how to use tanks effectively, and all this. And these days, there's a lot more understanding of like, um, yeah, most people who play. I mean, obviously, people on TL are new now that we're rebuilding, but like most of the vets especially on XD, are at such a level, like XD and WTH, they're at such a level that, you know, if a team from like the second or third seasonal, even like the best team, you know, if Exodus from the first seasonal played WTH today, it would be a 5-0 and like easy 5-0, you know.
Hmm.
But it's not just because players themselves have gotten better. It's because like the meta has evolved to the point where, you know, people have people have done so much prep. You know, there's like a million different. You can climb on a million different buildings. There's a million different cones of MG fire that you learn, and like tank positions and all this. That um, the game is a lot more complicated on the macro front, and I think that's more rewarding for comp players. Like Havald said this in his interview, and I think it's true. That like a, a lot of the teams, like TL was this type of team even in its heyday. A lot of teams that want to be good but don't have the shooters or don't have the game sense, like they prep their asses off in order to give themselves that advantage and sort of make up for that. Like the sort of intuitive map knowledge and game sense that EU players have, that NA players sometimes struggle with. That you can offset that with prep, and I think a lot in the olden days when you can do like arty snipes and have sort of the arty mini game, that was a lot more conducive to teams with some smart veterans sort of outplaying other teams that
Hmm.
are technically better than them. And these days you can't do that. It's true, because you know you have the one arty and it can't be touched and all this. But I think ultimately, like if you count everything together, the meta's more complex. Teams know what they're doing more, um, and so much so that like you know back in seasonal 2 or 3, when we had to completely rebuild TL and it was just all blueberries, we could still sort of get decently far in the seasonal. But these days with blueberries who don't know anything about anything, you don't like you can't get anywhere. You know, you can't even beat D-list teams.
Right. Well, at least like kind of the mapping there is, or the mapping's there, right? So I think that does
Yeah.
like ease the I guess the progression from that, because I think if you were to start a team from fresh, and you didn't have like that experience coming from, I mean, I kind of did that with the Otters. Me and some friends had started a team, but we hadn't like been in the comp scene really at all. We did an 18v18 tournament as like a LARPer team, but then starting the Otters and whatnot and moving on from that, there was like a lot to learn. Which we had like teams reach out to us and help us out. Like Esprit had given us kind of how they play the map and like how they run openers and stuff like that, and how they roster, and so I kind of sped it along. But I couldn't imagine starting from scratch, like totally
Oh
from
yeah.
scratch.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I mean, that's the one thing, that's the only reason TL is still kicking, because like we're not starting from scratch. Like we
Right.
have a bunch of new players, but we have mountains and mountains and mountains and mountains of like prep from the heyday, you know, that still works. And obviously the meta's changed a little bit, but like we still have tons of um like a lot of the maps haven't changed at all, you know. The maps are the same. When you prep an opener, um, you know, you might make tweaks, but like you have most of the prep and you can just add on. I know for tanking especially, there's actually a ton of tank prep that you have to do. And I know that like, you know, opener positions, opener lights, heavies and all that takes a lot of time. So when you have part of it, it's just easier to do the other part. Um, so yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to share with up and coming tankers or people trying to get into tanking, like things that you would recommend them do, or any advice you'd give them?
Um, Like for the comp scene or just in general?
Yeah, we'll go for the comp scene. Yeah.
Okay. Well, first thing I tell any tankers is that read the tank Bible. It's a little outdated right now, but you know, I'm working on it slowly. But the tank v tank stuff, meaning like, you know, where to hit, how many shots it takes to kill what tank, how many shots AT takes to kill which tanks, all that is still accurate. Um, and like it may seem like a cop out, like, oh wow, I wrote it, whatever. But people tankers need to understand, like, they need to internalize those statistics. They need to, when a driver gets hit by an AT, uh, or when a driver gets hit by anything and takes any damage, they need to understand, like, based on the damage value, for example, how, whether that's AT, whether that's an AT gun. They need to learn the sounds of the game. You know, if somebody's firing a tank in forest, it sounds different than if they're firing in an open field. If somebody's like, all these are little things that you learn, and all that stuff is in the tank Bible. So if you give it a read, memorize it, internalize it, uh, you'll get the basics down, and that's like, you know, even tankers today, are some of them are still struggling with the basics. I'd say, like, I don't know why, but most teams tankers don't seem to have a clue what they're doing. Like, they're still playing pubs in a certain sense. Like, there are teams that still don't kite even, and by kiting I mean like using hard cover to back and forth, so that when you get hit you don't get killed. You know, you can just back
Yeah.
and then repair. Um, and stuff like that. And you know, teams are learning. Like I said earlier, the meta is growing. But so the first thing I'll say is read the tank Bible, and then the second thing I'll say is, if you're interested in learning, you can talk to the good tankers I've mentioned, um, like, you know, or watch their VODs. You know, when I was coming up in Overwatch back in the day, you hear like, how do you get better? How do you get better? Well, you review your own VODs, and you look at pro VODs. You know, you look at pros and you say like, why are they doing this? What are they doing? So, not to say that we're pro, but just to say that, like, we're the best players in the game right now. And if you're up and coming, watching VODs, my gunner Jack has a YouTube channel. Most of these tankers have YouTube channels where you could go and watch VODs of their performance, and you can see how are they communicating, how are they playing around the map, where are they positioning, um, and stuff like that. And if you vacuum them up, those strats up pretty quickly, then you can start making your own sort of game style and gameplay, um, and then you'll become a good tanker.
And then to kind of close it out, do you have anything you'd like to say to the either the greater HL community or the comp community in general? Like any players you'd like to shout out or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. I want to shout out my tank crew, so Grecker and Jack. Um, Grecker's a phenomenal spotter. He's been with me for a long time, and Jack is my gunner, and he's one of the best gunners in the game. Um, I'm really proud of you boys, and I want to shout out Coltrane, who Coltrane is an old vet from back in the day, and you know, from the heyday of TL, he was our commander, versus core and all this. And when everybody left for other teams, he was a good player. Uh, all of his friends left. You know, they went to XD, they went to whatever. But he stayed with TL, and I really appreciate that. It's meant a lot to me. And other than that, Raisin, if you're listening, we still have beef. You're trash. Um, And yeah, that's pretty much it.
I like the spice at the end. That's good.
Yeah, Raisin and I have beat. Raisin is an old. He used to play tank and then he played in for core, and he used to talk about how NA's trash and TL's trash and all this. So
Right.
Christ knows who he plays for now, but doesn't matter.
I think he is still, or I think he's in XD, I believe, or maybe he's not.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't remember. But all right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, dude.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem.